Why are Islamic countries in the most messed up situations? Corruption, disorder, lawlessness. Islamic countries? There are no Islamic countries. At this point of history, there is no Islamic country. There are only Muslim majority countries, which were ruled by colonials until yesterday, and then ruled by the set-up rulers, set by the colonials who served the interests of their former colonial masters, and not the interests of their own country or people. And then, many of the Muslim majority countries were invaded and despoiled by powerful non-Muslim countries. Therefore, Muslim majority countries are in a very messed up condition at this point of history, full of corruption, and the people are astray from Islam. But before all these colonial rulings and invasions, Muslim majority countries were the best countries compared to all other countries. Islam always elevates the nation Islam conquests. Before Islam, Arabia was a land of various nomadic tribes, submerged in the darkness of ignorance and polytheism. The Arabs were a people looked down upon for their barbarity and savagery. Injustice, cruelty, and obscenity prevailed in this society. The rich and powerful oppressed the poor and weak. The Arabs had a proud, misogynistic culture. Women were treated as objects and had no social status. Practices such as female infanticide were common. Gambling, drinking, robbing, raiding, and kidnapping people, etc. were the norm. They were considered the lowest in every way, while there were other vast empires such as the Roman Byzantine Empire and the Persian Sassanid Empire, which were well established and powerful. However, with the advent of Islam, during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this society transformed completely. Righteousness and justice prevailed, and all these tribes united under one faith. And eventually, Arabia became the third superpower. After the death of the Prophet, when Abu Bakr became the Caliph, he laid down the foundations of the first Caliphate, adhering to the teachings of the Prophet. Under his reign, the Rashidun Caliphate launched a dual offensive, on one hand against the Persian Empire in the northeast, and on the other hand, the Byzantine Empire in the northwest. Facing these two superpowers simultaneously was a daring task, and while the Muslims were highly outnumbered and didn't have the technology or resources to go against these powers, in the series of battles that took place, as many might say, the impossible became possible. During the Caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, these outnumbered and ill-equipped Muslims brought down two of the biggest empires in the world, the Persian Sassanid Empire and the Roman Byzantine Empire. Though such vast kingdoms with great power, these two empires were extremely oppressive and unjust to their people. Persia was constantly in a state of great political turmoil and civil war, as the government enforced high taxes, social inequalities, and the Zoroastrian doctrine on all its civilians. On the other hand, the Roman Byzantines were ruling on foreign lands and oppressed their civilians with high taxes and inequality among the rich and poor. The empire went through various economic crises as a result of exhausting soil from over-cultivation and forced labor on slaves and captives. It was the Muslims who liberated the people of Persia from the messed-up, corrupted Persian politics, and the people of Byzantine Rome from its oppressive and unjust rule. And under Islamic rule, the civilians of these nations had the most prosperous lives and high living standards. Unlike the Persian and Roman kings and rulers, the focus of the Islamic Empire was not based on seeking the glory of the ruler, but was focused on the lives of the people. And within just these few decades, during the Caliphate of Uthman ibn Affan, he expanded the Islamic Empire as far as to North Africa and several islands of the Mediterranean. This great advance, however, was halted when internal conflicts caused civil war to break out, and thus the empire's borders were temporarily stagnated. However, with the establishment of the Umayyad dynasty, with Damascus serving as their capital, the Umayyads continued the Muslim conquest, incorporating Transoxania, Sindh, Maghreb, and the Iberian Peninsula under Islamic rule. At its greatest extent, the Umayyad Caliphate covered 4,300,000 square miles, making it one of the largest empires in history in terms of area. The Umayyads were eventually overtaken by the Abbasids in 750. Survivors from the Umayyads established themselves in Cordoba, Spain, which had been conquered by the Umayyad general Tariq ibn Ziyad in the year 711 to 718, and these survivors formed the Emirate of Cordoba. Hence, these two empires coexisted during the same time. At this time, Spain and the entirety of Europe was in the Dark Ages. These lands were culturally, economically, and intellectually backward. 90% of Europeans were in poverty and lived as peasants. There was constant warfare, and the people led barbaric lives. However, under the rule of the Muslims, Spain flourished like never before, becoming a world center for science, medicine, philosophy, and invention during the Islamic Golden Age. The world's first universities were established around this time. It was through Cordoba that knowledge made its way to Europe, bringing these lands out of the Dark Ages and into the Age of Enlightenment. During this time, the Abbasids established their center at Baghdad, which also became a center for knowledge, culture, and trade. It was during their reign that the jurisprudence part of Islam, known as Sharia, came together and the Hadith were compiled. And during the time of their fourth caliph, Harun al-Rashid, the legendary library known as Bayt al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, was established. Scholars from various backgrounds in the Islamic world were united with one goal of translating classical knowledge into the Arabic language. This scholarly knowledge was vital to the success of the empire as they developed and experimented and took this information to the next level. This caliphate, however, ended when the Mongols under Hulagu Khan captured and sacked Baghdad in 1258. It is said that the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates ran black for days with the ink of countless precious books from Baghdad's vast libraries that were flung into the rivers and red from the blood of the scholars whose lives were taken at the time of the invasion. However, just within a few years, something quite unbelievable happened. The Islamic articles of faith were so irresistible and influential that even the Mongols, the enemies who came to conquest and destroy Islam and the Muslims, accepted Islam. The grandson of Genghis Khan, Berke Khan, embraced Islam and was the first to establish Islam in a Mongol state, and eventually, through the lineage of the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur, who founded the Timurid Empire, Babur, his great-great-great-grandson, founded the Mughal Empire, which ruled almost all of the Indian subcontinent. Around 708 to 711, Muslims under a young 17-year-old Umayyad general, Muhammad ibn Qasim, first led an expedition against robbers from the areas of Sindh, northwest of the Indian subcontinent, who were wreaking havoc, raiding on Arab trade vessels traveling in the area, and kidnapping women of other horrific acts. The Indian subcontinent at the time was ruled by oppressive kings and their governors, who either by manipulation or force used to make their civilians worship them literally as gods or heroes. This society was entirely based on a caste system. At the top of the hierarchy were the Brahmins, who were mainly teachers and intellectuals. Then the Kshatriyas, or the warriors and rulers. Next, the Vaishyas, or the prostitutes, traders, and merchants. And at the bottom were the Shudras, who did all the labor work and menial jobs. Outside of this caste system were the Achuts, the Dalits, or the Untouchables, who were the lowest of the society, looked down and despised. The Indian subcontinent was built upon racism and bigotry. The upper and lower castes lived in segregated colonies. One could only marry within one's caste. Water wells were not shared. Brahmins did not accept food or drink from the Shudras, and the Dalits were, as mentioned, untouchable. In this society, privileges went to the upper castes, while they sanctioned and repressed the lower castes, and there could be no social mobility to achieve a greater status. Who you are born as determines your position in this society. Besides the oppressive caste system, injustice, barbarity, and superstition prevailed in the society. It was only when the Muslims conquered the land they established a civil society and liberated the people from their superstitious and polytheistic beliefs and abolished this caste system and established equality. During the Sultanate of Delhi, the Indian subcontinent grew to great power and at a point were successfully able to repel attacks from the Mongols. This sultanate also increased the demand of trade and business, opening the Indian subcontinent to the rest of the known world. Later, during the reign of the Mughal Empire, the Indian subcontinent enjoyed much cultural and economic progress as well as religious harmony. The Mughal Empire was at its largest extent and flourished at its highest economic development during the reign of the Emperor Aurangzeb. Almost the entire Indian subcontinent was brought under one domain. Trade routes and business expanded further abroad. The empire also progressed in technology, science, architecture, culture, and art. Inventions such as paper, the printing press, military technology, etc. were developed. And last but not least, one of the largest and greatest Islamic empires in history, the Ottoman Empire, ruling for nearly 700 years. The Ottomans ended the Byzantine Empire with the conquest of Constantinople in 1453 by Mehmed II. Under the reign of Suleiman I, the Ottoman Empire marked the peak of its power and prosperity, as well as the highest development of its governmental, social, and economic systems. The Ottomans highly contributed to the development of hospitals, healthcare, and witnessed advances in medicine, mining, and military technology. They also set up a leading observatory in Istanbul and had established more than 300 universities and learning centers. Every nation Islam conquest, Islam elevated it to its highest. The list of great Islamic empires can go on and on, such as the Seljuks, who expanded the empire, conquering large parts of the Byzantine Empire, and during the Mongol invasions, created a barrier to Europe against the Mongols from the east, and also defended the Islamic world against the Crusaders from the west. The Seljuks were also ambitious builders who constructed great universities and standardized Islamic learning, built mosques, hospitals, inns, bridges, and roads from stone. The Ayyubid dynasty, known by the great Sultan Saladin, who defeated the massive army of the Crusaders and recaptured Jerusalem. At the height of his power, he ruled a unified Muslim region stretching from Egypt to Arabia. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, known to be slaves, who alas defeated the Mongols in the Battle of Ain Jalut and revived the Caliphate. Compared to before, at, and after Islamic ruling, countries were at their best point of their own history. These lands flourished like never before when ruled by Islam. Like, share, and subscribe to Truth Shall Prevail.